In the late 19th century, the unassigned lands were opened up for settlement in a series of historic land runs. On April 22, 1889, thousands of eager settlers raced to claim their piece of Oklahoma territory, giving rise to what would become Guthrie. The town sprang up, a bustling hub of activity fueled by dreams of prosperity and new beginnings. From its humble beginnings as a land-run settlement to its status as the first state capital of Oklahoma, Guthrie has played a pivotal role in shaping the cultural tapestry of the region. Let's be real, before statehood, Indian and Oklahoma territory were lawless, wild, and oftentimes crazy. With the inflood of new inhabitants, some less favorable people descended on the area, and these people were identified by the term outlaw. There's a special Boot Hill section in Summit View Cemetery that is the final resting place for several folks of notoriety. In the American Wild West, few figures captivate the imagination quite like Bill Doolin. An outlaw of legendary proportions, Doolin rode the rugged frontier, leaving behind a legacy of daring bank heists, quick-draw shootouts, and a life lived on the edge of society who became a symbol of rebellion. Born in Arkansas in 1858, Bill Doolin's early life seemed unremarkable. However, it wasn't long before the lure of the open range and the thrill of adventure Doolin's name became synonymous with the infamous Wild Bunch, a gang of outlaws that terrorized the frontier with their audacious bank robberies and train heists. The gang struck fear into the hearts of lawmen and citizens alike. As Doolin's reputation grew, so did the efforts to bring him to justice. Lawmen such as Heck Thomas and Bill Tilghman pursued the Wild Bunch relentlessly. Doolin's life was marked by daring escapes and close calls with the law. However, the end was inevitable. On August 25, 1896, Doolin was captured, and though he managed to escape, his luck eventually ran out. In a dramatic and fateful shootout in Lawson, Oklahoma, Bill Doolin met his end at the hands of the posse under Deputy U.S. Marshal Heck Henry Thomas, and was buried in Summit View Cemetery. The legend of Bill Doolin endures, not only in the pages of history, but also in the folklore of the Wild West. Was he a ruthless bandit or a folk hero fighting against a changing world? The debate continues in the captivating saga of a true frontier legend. The next gentleman that I'm going to tell you about is buried next to Bill Doolin. Bear with me, this tale is long and it's a wild ride. This man led a more exciting life after he passed away than when he was alive. In American criminal folklore, few tales are as peculiar and captivating as that of Elmer McCurdy. McCurdy managed to secure an odd post-mortem legacy, becoming a sideshow act in traveling carnivals, and even played a part in film history. Born on January 1, 1880 in Washington, Maine, Elmer McCurdy was no criminal mastermind. His life of crime began with unsuccessful attempts at robbing trains and banks. However, the lack of success didn't detour him from his life of crime. He quickly gained a reputation as a bumbling outlaw. One time, McCurdy put nitroglycerin on the safe's door to open it, but used too much. The safe was destroyed in the blast, and so was a majority of the money. McCurdy's final robbery took place on October 4, 1911, near Okesa, Oklahoma. Targeting a Katy train which was supposed to contain $400,000 in was cash, intended as a royalty payment to the Osage Nation. McCurdy and his two accomplices mistakenly stopped a passenger train. The men were only able to get away with $46 from the mail clerk, 2 demijohns of whiskey, a revolver, a coat, and the conductor's watch. A newspaper account of the robbery later called it one of the smallest in the history of train robbery due to the minimal amount of money stolen. Elmer's criminal career reached its bizarre conclusion on October 7, 1911. After robbing the Katy train, a pursuit ensued, resulting in a shootout with lawmen. McCurdy was killed in the crossfire, and his body was subsequently taken to a funeral home in Pawhuska, Oklahoma. You would think that's where Elmer's story would end, but it doesn't. We are just getting started. Rather than being buried, McCurdy's body was embalmed by the funeral director with an arsenic-based preservative. Unclaimed and unidentified, McCurdy's mummified remains were put on public display, becoming a peculiar attraction at the funeral home that charged guests 5 cents each to see the outlaw. Eventually, a carnival owner purchased McCurdy's body under false pretenses. James and Charles Patterson pretended to be Elmer's long-lost brothers and stated they were shipping the body to San Francisco for a proper burial, when they actually shipped the body to Kansas, where it became an attraction in their embalmed bandit exhibit in the Great Patterson Carnival shows. In 1922, the corpse was sold to Louis Sonny, who displayed the body in his crime museum. In 1928, Elmer became part of the official sideshow that accompanied the Trans-American Foot Race. In 1933, director Dwayne Esper borrowed the body, placing the corpse in the lobby of theaters as a dead dope fiend to promote his film Narcotic, which was an exploration film that followed the downward spiral of an idealistic medical student whose fall from grace leads him to opium dens, a carnival freak show, swanky drug parties, dingy brothels, and finally the barrel of his own revolver. After Sonny died in 1949, the body was placed in a storage facility in Los Angeles, California. In 1964, Sonny's son Dan loaned the body to filmmaker David F. Friedman, resulting in Elmer making a brief appearance in Friedman's 1967 film She Freak, which is about a woman named Jade who is a waitress who leaves the greasy diner business behind for the excitement of the carnival. She quickly discovers that she despises freaks and human oddities. Honestly, I bet it didn't take her long to realize that. In 1968, Dan sold the body along with other wax figures for $10,000 to Spoonie Singh, the owner of the Hollywood Wax Museum. Singh had bought the figures for two Canadian men who had exhibited them at a show at Mount Rushmore. While being on exhibit, the corpse sustained damage in a windstorm. The tips of the ears, along with the fingers and toes, were blown off. The men eventually returned the corpse back to Singh, who decided that it looked too gruesome and grotesque and was not lifelike enough to exhibit. Singh then sold the body to Ed Learch, part owner of the Pike, an amusement park in Long Beach, California. By 1976, McCurdy's corpse was hanging in the Laugh in the Dark funhouse at the Pike. On December 8, 1976, the production crew of the television series The $6 Million Man, which starred Lee Majors, was filming scenes for an episode titled Carnival of Spies at the Pike. During the shoot, a prop man moved what he thought was a wax mannequin that was hanging from a gallows. When the mannequin's arm broke off, a human bone and muscle tissue were visible. Police were called and the corpse was taken to the Los Angeles coroner's office. On December 9th, Dr. Joseph Choi conducted an autopsy and determined that the body was that of a human male who had died of a gunshot wound to the chest. The body was completely petrified, covered in wax, and had been covered with layers of phosphorus paint. It weighed approximately 50 pounds and was 63 inches in height. Some hair was still visible on the sides and back of the head, while the ears, big toes, and fingers were missing. The examination also revealed incisions from his original autopsy and embalming. Tests conducted on the tissue showed the presence of arsenic, which was a component of embalming fluid until the late 1920s. Tests also revealed tuberculosis in the lung, as well as bunions and scars that McCurdy was documented to have. While the bullet that caused the fatal wound was presumably removed during the original autopsy, the bullet jacket was found. It was determined to be a gas check, which was first used in 1905 until 1940. These clues helped investigators pinpoint the era in which the man had been killed. Further clues to the man's identity were found when the mandible was removed for dental analysis. Inside the mouth was a 1924 penny and ticket stub to Louis Sonny's Museum of Crime. Investigators contacted Dan Sonny, who confirmed that the body was Elmer McCurdy. Forensic anthropologist Dr. Clyde Snow was then called in to help make a positive identification. Dr. Snow took radiographs of the skull and placed them over a photo of McCurdy taken at the time of his death in a process called superimposition. Snow was able to determine that the skull was that of McCurdy. By December 11th, the story of McCurdy's journey had been featured in newspaper, television, and on the radio. Several funeral homes called the coroner's office offering to bury McCurdy free of charge, but officials decided to wait to see if any living relatives would come forward to claim the body. Fred Olds, who represented the Indian Territory Posse of Oklahoma Westerns, eventually convinced Dr. Thomas Noguchi, then the chief medical examiner coroner for the county of Los Angeles. After further testing to ensure proper identification, Olds was finally allowed to take the custody of the body when no relatives came forward to claim Elmer, to allow him to bury the body in Oklahoma. On April 22, 1977, a funeral procession led by two white horses transported McCurdy to the Boot Hill section in Summit View Cemetery. A graveside service attended by approximately 300 people was conducted. To ensure that McCurdy's body would not be stolen, 2 feet of concrete was poured over the casket. Finally buried 66 years after his death, Elmer McCurdy, the notorious outlaw who outlived his legend. What do you think about that story? Is that not wild? It's all absolutely true. Rest in peace, Elmer McCurdy. There is a white little military headstone that is situated between Doolin and McCurdy. I attempted to find more info on it, but I could not. The headstone reads J.N.O. Daniel 107th Company G, USCI. I found the J.N.O. is the abbreviation for John, so this is John Daniel, who served in the 107th Regiment in Company G in the United States Colored Infantry. There's no dates on the stone to confirm this gentleman's date of death. I'm unsure where he came from, how he came to be buried in Guthrie, or when he passed away. I guess some things will remain a mystery. I wanted to mention Mr. Daniel since he is in between Bill and Elmer. I didn't want him to be forgotten or overlooked. If you have more information on this gentleman, please leave it down below in the comment section. If you continue up the hill from Bill and Elmer, you'll find a couple other bandits. What's funny is the first couple times I was here, I didn't realize that. If you continue up the hill, there's more people to see. Tom Capers, shot by Ben Howard, November 6, 1897. I'm going to read to you a news article exactly how it was published on November 3, 1897, in the Daily Oklahoma State Capitol newspaper. About 8 o'clock last night in the Cotton Exchange Saloon on Division Street occurred one of the bloodiest quarrels ever recorded in the history of the city, from the results of which Tom Capers is now lying at his home in West Guthrie, with 4 bullet holes in his body with no hope of recovery. And Bert Henderson is lying at his home in East Guthrie with a bullet hole through his body, and Ben Howard is in the county jail awaiting the results of his deadly bullets. About 7:30, Tom Capers entered the saloon with several other Negroes and commenced shooting craps in the back room. Bert Henderson was running the money, which was bet on the game. Capers made a bet of 50 cents on the turn of the dice. He lost, and Henderson picked up the money. When Capers claiming he had been cheated, Capers made a motion as if to get a knife, when Henderson struck at him with a large stick, which he used in handling the dice. Just at this time, Ben Howard, proprietor of the saloon, appeared in the door between the saloon and the gambling room with a .38 caliber revolver and began firing. 3 balls took effect in Capers' head and 1 pierced his back. He fell to the floor, and Henderson, in trying to get out the door, was struck in the back by a stray bullet. Deputy Sheriff Chaz Carpenter heard the shooting and arrived on the scene a moment after the last shot was fired, and hustled Howard off to the county jail. Capers had succeeded in reaching Howard with his knife before being shot. Howard's coat was cut in several places but was not hurt. Tom Capers was moved to his home of his sister in West Guthrie, and Doctors Cotterill and Williams were called. He had 2 ugly wounds in his head, one just over his right eye and one in the back of the head. Another bullet had torn through the flesh of his chin, and another was buried in the flesh of his back. At 3 o'clock today he was still alive, but with no hope of recovery. He is the brother of Councilman John Capers of the West 5th Ward. He is 30 years of age and is known to the policemen as very quarrelsome, having figured in police court several times. Bert Henderson was placed on a cot in the rear of the saloon, where he remained all night. This morning he was taken to his mother's home, Mrs. Sally Adams, on Capitol Hill. He is resting easy today and has not thought his wound will prove fatal. Henderson was recently released from the penitentiary, where he served a year for grand larceny. He is said to be very quiet and always seeks to avoid trouble. 2 days later, another article appeared in the Daily Oklahoma State Capitol on November 5, 1897. The headline reads, Capers is dead. Died this morning from the effects of Ben Howard's bullets. Tom Capers died this morning at 6:45 a.m. from the effects of the bullets of Ben Howard, who shot him Tuesday evening. A postmortem is being held this afternoon in Judge Strange's office. Bert Henderson, who was accidentally shot in the back, is getting along nicely. The date on the headstone is the actual date of Tom's burial. No charges were found to be filed against Ben Howard, as the newspaper report indicated this was a self-defense situation. It is surmised that the family did not claim the body to pay for a burial, which is why he was laid to rest in Boot Hill, because a local troublemaker did not seem to warrant being buried with more egregious outlaws. Richard West, known as Little Dick, was born in Fort Worth, Texas in 1860. working as a cowboy on the Housel Ranch in Oklahoma Territory when he first met Bill Doolin in 1892. He was with the gang during a bank robbery in Southwest City, Missouri, which resulted in a gunfight in which West was wounded. He remained with the gang through 1896 when Doolin was killed by Deputy U.S. Marshal Heck Thomas and Deputy Marshal Bill Tilghman. Thomas and Deputy Marshals Bill Tilghman and Chris Madsen systematically eliminated the gang over the course of the 1890s, leading to their nickname, the Three Guardsmen. After the Doolin gang, West helped to form the Jennings Gang with lawyers-turned-outlaws Al Jennings and his brother Frank, which made a number of bungled train robberies. After failing miserably, the gang fell apart. 4 members were captured and sentenced to jail in 1897. West eluded capture. Deputy Marshal Madsen eventually tracked West to Guthrie, Oklahoma, where a shootout ensued, during which West was killed on April 13, 1898. The next bandit is Charlie Pierce, whose stone reads Charlie Pierce Desperado, killed by officers on May 5, 1895. Charlie was an American outlaw who rode with both the Dalton Gang and the Doolin-Dalton Gang in the 1890s. Born in Missouri in 1866, he joined the Dalton Gang in 1892 after the gang was almost eliminated by the failed bank robbery attempts in Coffeyville, Kansas. Charlie joined the Doolin-Dalton Gang, which was co-led by Bill Doolin and Bill Dalton. Pierce participated in numerous bank and train robberies. On September 1, 1893, Pierce was involved in the Battle of Ingalls, which was a gunfight between the gang and U.S. Marshals, where both Pierce and fellow outlaw George Bitter Creek Newcomb was wounded at Ingalls. Both outlaws escaped capture. I will have to do another video on the Battle of Ingalls another time, as this video is way too long as it is. Thanks for sticking with me if you're still here. Once healed, the two rode to Pawnee, Oklahoma, to the house of Rose Dunn, a girlfriend of Newcomb's. Dunn's brothers, known as the Dunn brothers, were bounty hunters, and by this time there was a significant bounty on both outlaws, believed to have been around $5,000 each. As Newcomb and Pierce dismounted, they were shot and killed by the Dunns. The Dunns took Charlie to Guthrie to collect the bounty on him. Sums up the meaning of the old saying, "You are the company that you keep." Charlie and his friend, Bitter Creek Newcomb, were ambushed by their friends, the Dunn brothers, for money. Fun fact, I have a friend whose husband is a distant relative of George Bitter Creek Newcomb. Newcomb is not buried in Summit View Cemetery. He was buried 10 miles west of Norman, Oklahoma, and his grave has since been washed away by the Cimarron River. This last fellow stone says Bert Casey killed November 8, 1902 by U.S. Marshals. William E. Bert Casey was a violent outlaw who operated out of the Oklahoma Territory. Bert and his gang were responsible for several savage murders, including 11-year-old J. Beamblossom, son of Dr. Zeno Beamblossom, Caddo County Sheriff Frank Smith, and his deputy George Beck. Casey's gang were made up of horse thieves who robbed people, often killing their victims and riding away with their meager plunder. One of these victims was J. Beamblossom, who was murdered in front of his father, Dr. Zeno Beamblossom, on August 4, 1901. The murder of Beamblossom was especially heinous. The 11-year-old boy was shot when his family did not raise their hands quick enough during a holdup. These actions made Casey one of the territory's most wanted men. Motivated by grief, Dr. Beamblossom gave up his medical practice and turned detective. Dr. Beamblossom helped lawmen track down and arrest some of Casey's cohorts responsible for his son's death. On a late Sunday afternoon, January 14, 1902, the Casey gang robbed a group of poor farmers traveling from Anadarko. One of the victims returned to town and reported the holdup to Caddo County Sheriff Frank Smith. On the following morning, Sheriff Smith, along with deputies George Beck and Will Briggs, trailed the gang to a house west of town. As Smith and Beck approached the front door, they were shot dead by members of the gang. One of the most senseless killings attributed to Casey was his judging the range of accuracy of his new Winchester rifle by shooting a farmer working in his field some 400 yards away. Casey was finally stopped by two of his former gang members, Fred Hudson and Ed Lockett, who were given Deputy U.S. Marshal commissions and promised a pardon if they captured or killed Casey. They killed him on November 8, 1902. Casey's body remained unclaimed and he was buried in Boot Hill. The bean blossoms are buried in Oklahoma City, and I'll have to do a video sometime on that cemetery because it's also one of my favorites. And there you have it. In my opinion, one of the most interesting cemeteries in Oklahoma. I guess I'm weird or odd, but I've been to Summit View Cemetery several times. I try to run by every time I'm in Guthrie just to say hey. If you stayed through this entire video, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Please like, subscribe, and share this video if this is content or something that you enjoy seeing. Until next time, bye for now.